Okay, we're live. This is episode 200 and I'm sorry. I keep saying I'm in the 200s. It's 384 of Living Free in Tennessee. We'll be live recording. It's a thought of the walk, so it's a short one today. And I didn't really let y'all know when we were going to record this. As you can see, I'm in my Snuggie and my PJs this morning. I had kind of a big deal this morning. The Living Free in Tennessee workshop, spring workshop, is April 22nd through 24th. And we have awesome speakers. We have Sean Mills from Hack My Solar doing an off-grid presentation. We've got Dr. Ken Berry talking about the proper human diet. We've got John Willis from Special Operations Equipment in Camden, Tennessee, coming out to give us a kick in the tail about getting our stuff started. No excuses. And he ought to know because he has built his life with no excuses. We've got Kurt Duggar doing a cryptocurrency thing. What else we got, guys? I should remember. Jenny is going to do a session on forgiveness. Mama Sauce and I are going to talk about setting up what lessons learned from setting up a crowdfunding campaign that was successful. We've got Xavier Hawk coming in to talk more about his his work with Firon. We've got, I'm going to do a session on building community. And I'm sorry to whoever I just forgot. I mean, we've got all sorts of cool hands-on demos. We've got Mike Leonito doing a pig processing, and then we're totally going to cook that pig and eat that pig. So we will talk about the finer cuts, but when you prepare a pig for roasting, what you end up doing is not cutting it up into little pieces. You basically roast it all at one time. Our favorite lawyer is going to be doing an overview of just business structures, and I believe we will have a CPA like presence in there also talking about the financial side. That piece, guys, is where I get a lot of questions on small business startup, and I have set mine up with the advice of counsel on these things. And I have to admit, when I first started, I just started. But then I went back as soon as I had money to pay somebody to tell me what to do, because I want to use the tax law to my advantage, right? I want to use the structure to protect myself and my assets as best I can, to optimize my tax write-offs. And that comes with professionals who advise you. So that's going to be happening. We're going to do this really cool, like, round robin thing where we do speed dating for your business. So we'll have different stations with different advisors set up, and you just rotate on an alarm to each one. That's going to be really cool. We're going to be doing practical demos on welding. I believe we're going to be doing milling wood. We're going to do a fence installation demo. Somebody just offered to do like how to do ferments and kombucha. A whole bunch of people are just coming out of the woodwork saying, I know how to do this skill. Let me show you how to, let me show everybody how to do this skill. So we'll have lots of practical demos. I'm going to be touring the aquaponics and hydroponics and talking to you about, how to grow food that way, because growing food's important. We'll also have our gardens in by then, not in, but started to be in. So that'll be happening as well. JR might be doing a very special demo that you can find out about when you get here. And then John Pugliano is going to be here, and he's a ham guy, ham radio. He did this really cool slug casting demonstration at Jack Spirko's workshop, and I'm hoping he'll do that here too. And then he's going to talk to us about, finance in today's world. I think that's pretty important as well. By the way, YouTubers, good morning to Bobby and Rocket 8 Farm. Screw the glare. I like your glasses. I know I have glare. I actually feel like I have these like video lights here that I probably could figure out how to angle it. And I'm going to do a little more research on this. And I decided to come to you in my PJs this morning, just so you get here's the deal. At noon today, I got to be in a car with all my stuff packed and the coffee ready to go for the Freedom Cell event in East Tennessee. And then I'm driving one of my dogs to the dog boarder, because she's the one who runs off and then the other dogs run off. And that's really inconvenient when I'm out of town. And I found the dog boarder nearby, but I need to be on time. So when I've been up since 6, just beating feet, because I've also got a huge roasting day today. Not huge, but I managed to do most of today's roasting yesterday. I've got another hour or so of coffee roasting, and then I need to ship it out. And it's not like I have this backup that if I miss the mail deadline, I can totally just finish roasting it Saturday morning. Nope. No, it's got to be done and out the door by noon, no matter what. So all y'all who've ordered coffee, thank you. The one person who talked to me last night and ordered coffee late, the reason you're not getting your coffee out until actually Tuesday. It's on the Monday roasting schedule, but there's no mail Monday, I don't think, because of Martin Luther King Day. So that's all. I will get all the orders out that I have in hand today, except for that late one last night. That's definitely a next week thing because I don't want to have a lot of chaos. So anyway, I love wearing my hand knit snuggie by mom. Anyway, so today we'll be recording a podcast, and it's a thought of the walk. And I'm just going to jump right in. If I make a mistake, you'll see it, and you'll see me get mad, and life will go on. It hasn't happened in a while. I should make that happen just for entertainment factor, but nah. Then I'm lying to y'all, right? Okay, here we go. Oh, it's gonna do the ticky thing. Let me turn the ticky thing off. I need to take the one step of time to figure out how in the latest version of GarageBand you turn off the metronome because it always starts with the metronome. And do you know what it's like to click, 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 click? I don't need a metronome for recording a podcast, and it's like beating in my head while I'm giving the thing. So that's not super fun. Hi, Lisa. Good morning. I'm gonna see you soon. I'm sorry your house sitter fell through. Boo. I was looking forward to singing karaoke with you tonight. Okay, let's go. Well, welcome everyone to Living Free in Tennessee, where we talk about building the life you want to live on your terms. Today is Friday, January 15th, 2021, and this is episode 384 of Living Free in Tennessee. And in my show notes, I actually wrote 2020, but I noticed that it's a new year, so I managed to say the right thing. Anyway, it's Friday. Usually on Friday, we do an interview show or we do a thought of the walk. Now, we had an interview last Monday. Like I was I was off on the wrong days of the week last week, and I had an interview scheduled for Wednesday with Jeremy from Odyssey, the decentralized video platform that is a great YouTube alternative. And I got an email from him saying, I need to reschedule the next week because my wife's giving birth. And I was like, well, that's a pretty good excuse. So I did the homesteading episode you saw on Wednesday. Anyway, today's a thought of the walk. What is the thought of the walk for the new people? It's usually a shorter episode where I dive into a single concept. Like it was something that's just been on my mind. And the way I pick the topic is I go for walks with my dogs, which is good for my mind and my body. And I shut off all media. And while I'm out and about, often something will occur to me. And there's been a lot going on to go through the brain in the last couple of months. So of course I had one, and then I share it with y'all. And sometimes I touch a chord with the audience and they start emailing back and forth. And sometimes we have follow-up listener feedback shows related to it. It just depends. So today's a thought of the walk day. And this week I've been thinking about the difference between punitive and restorative justice. So I'm going to share some thoughts on that in today's show. Before I do that, I wanted to give you the workshop update. So Living Free in Tennessee has a spring workshop April 22nd through 24th, and there are a limited number of tickets. They are on sale to members through the weekend. And by weekend, I don't mean Martin Luther King Day too. On Martin Luther King Day, on Monday, I'm going to open it up to anybody who's not a member. But right now, if you are a member of livingfreeintennessee.com, you can go to livingfreeintennessee.com, log into your membership page, and then right there is a link, and you fill out the form and you submit it, and you get your ticket to the workshop. They've been selling pretty fast this morning. I've got about 10 left right now, although once I get all the tickets in and see how many couples we have or people carpooling, I will open up as many tickets as I can this year. Last year, I was keeping it to a certain level for facilities reasons, but we figured out how to expand our facilities a little bit this year. On the other hand, once I sell out tickets, I'm out of tickets. I have a wait list after that happens. So if you were trying to get a ticket and you didn't get one, definitely get on the wait list, because when I open up extra tickets, if that's possible, because we're limited by how many cars we can park, then I'll go, first come, first serve on those. So that's all over at livingfreeintennessee.com. If you want to see all about who's speaking, I've gone over it a few times already. I've shared it on the website. Just go to livingfreeintennessee.com, click on the workshop navigation item at the top of the page, and that will show you what's up for the workshop this year, as well as if you're a member, give you a link to log into your page if you can't find it any other way. So that's happening. The other thing I wanted to talk about before we jump in, especially with the widespread censorship and deplatforming of all of our friends and some of our enemies lately. Um, I just want to highlight some of the communities that we have in the Living Free in Tennessee network that you can join. The first is the MeWe group. For several years, we've been very active on MeWe. We built from scratch there, and the hard thing about building from scratch on MeWe was, unlike Facebook, which just kind of serves you up rando content, right? When you set up your MeWe account, there's nothing there if you're not following anybody. So based on the friends you have and the groups that you join is the experience you get there. So a lot of people early on went to MeWe and then didn't find anything. And that's because they didn't do anything. It's kind of like back in the days of Twitter when you signed up for Twitter. If you didn't follow anybody, you're out of luck. You don't get any content. So we have a MeWe group there. It's a great group. They're pretty active. It is where I would say the hub of most of the Living Free in Tennessee traffic is right now. That said, their servers could be turned off just like Parler's. I'm hoping that that was a wake up call to MeWe and they think about how they're hosted. I'm sure they are based on what I know about the founders. But if you want to be involved in the community, join multiple community areas, right? So we also have a Telegram group. That link is in the show notes, but it's t.me/LFTN group. That's our group. Go there. If for some reason MeWe were shut down, there's a whole bunch of people from the MeWe group on the Telegram group. And we also have an Odyssey account. And the cool thing about Odyssey, which you'll learn about more after I interview our friend Jeremy, is that when you set it up as a viewer, you can share videos, kind of like you can share videos or posts on Facebook or MeWe, right? So I actually think it's way better than YouTube for that because I can go be like, oh, hey, Xavier Hawk had a really good video today. I'm going to share that on my feed. And then I write a little thing about it and I share it. That's something I really like doing now. I don't think you can do that on YouTube, although it looks like I've seen people do something like that. So I could be wrong, but that sharing factor is a way to turn a video YouTube like platform into ways to connect. So those are three places you can find us. I'm going to be adding some more decentralized social networks over the next few weeks. And as I find people to help me sort of be the moderators of these different platforms, because managing like 10 platforms is way too much. We set the Telegram group up at the request of members. And then what we found is that the same conversations and the same people on the MeWe group are on the Telegram group. We had a bit of a conversation about that and decided, we'll keep them both. But I can say from experience right now, MeWe is where more of the conversation is. That doesn't mean that eventually the Telegram group won't take on a personality of its own. It just hasn't. Now, I am also on Parler. If Parler comes back, I'm just at Nicole Sauce, which is my name. I don't have any LFTN stuff set up there. And as I said, we're going to be setting up some other decentralized platforms as a backup. It's kind of like when I said get your documentation in order. Get your social documentation in order too. People you really want to be in conversations with or connected with, if they're on different platforms, connect with them on different platforms just so you know how to reach them if one goes away. It's kind of like if I forgot to pay my phone bill and you couldn't call me, but you knew where I lived, you could drive to my house and talk to me, or you could send me a letter, right? So you want to just think about some of those things. So I invite you to join us over there. Okay. Lastly, before we jump in, if you want to send me an email or feedback on this episode or anything else, you can do it, Nicole, Nicole, at livingfreeintennessee.com, or go over to livingfreeintennessee.com and then click on the contact form, and those come to me as well. Especially, we've had a couple issues with registering for the event this morning where mobile is being a little hinky. I think I got that worked out. But if you go there and you're like, nothing's loading, it must be sold out. That's not what's going on. The page is not loading. Send me a note. And if we are sold out, I'll put you on the wait list. And if we're not sold out, I'll be like, here's another way to get to that forum that might work better, or I can tell you what's going on. With that, it is time for the main content of today's show. And that content is punitive versus restorative justice specifically. So justice is this idea that we can make right the wrongs that inevitably happen in this world. We hurt each other sometimes. All of us hurt each other sometimes. And justice is sort of this concept that you can make up for some of your mistakes or some of the ways you've hurt people intentionally. Some of us actually hurt people intentionally, right? So, like you drove your car into someone's house because you fell asleep at the wheel, which was an irresponsible thing to do because you drove too tired. Well, maybe you should pay to fix that. That's justice. I mean, it was a bad day for you too, but it's not their fault that you fell asleep at the wheel and ran into their house, right? Or stole a chocolate egg from the store. I did when I was like 2 or 3 years old. How do you make that right? Do you pay for it? Do you return it? Do you apologize? What is that? That's justice, right? You need to make up for those things you've done. Justice gets harder as transgressions get bigger though. Kidnapped and kill somebody, how do you ever make that right? How do you ever make that right? Can you be trusted to walk freely in our society if you are kidnapping and killing people? Good question. Why did you do it? How long's it been since you've done it? How have you changed in that time? Do people really change or do they not really change? Questions that all come up when we start talking about justice in relationship to making up for the harm that people cause, right? If not, if you can't walk free, is spending the rest of your life in prison the answer, or is there another answer? I don't know the answer to that question, guys. What's the proper response to killing and kidnapping someone? I don't really know. It turns out that justice is a very simple concept. But as you start thinking about it more and more, it can become really complex, especially as you start thinking about specific examples. I liken this to when you're raising children and you want to give them sort of the natural logical consequence. Sometimes they do things that you have to think about for a day or two. What's the natural logical consequence of that kid's just being annoying, right? I don't know what the natural consequence is. I guess it's that I tell them that they're being annoying, but I really need them stopping, like so there are sometimes the natural consequences of things are hard to figure out. And sometimes the natural consequence, in raising a child of like, let's say they lost their jacket. Okay, a natural consequence is you're cold, but it is your child. And if it's 21 degrees outside and you make them go out in a t-shirt and stay out there a long time, they actually can get really sick and die. So there's got to be a balance for the scale of what the natural, in air quotes, natural consequence is. And I think that's true with justice as well. So people push for justice for a lot of reasons, and some people push way beyond what would be reasonable in scale of what the quote unquote transgression was. They push for it from people they know who have transgressed. So like you come to my house, you steal a thing, I figure out that you stole a thing. What's the natural? That's like a direct relationship, right? That's pretty easy to deal with. Well, people sometimes want their pound of flesh because they were hurt. It hurt my feelings that you stole my coffee. And now not only do I want my coffee back, but I want an apology. That's reasonable, I guess. But now I want you to work at my coffee business for 2 weeks for free. It's starting to get over the line, isn't it? So, people who want their pound of flesh on behalf of somebody else they perceive to have been harmed who is not themselves demanding one, that's a whole different thing. Like, I want you to pay for the thing you did to Fred, but Fred doesn't care. Well, then why are we doing this? Right? Or people want things righted from generations past. You see, as we get further and further down this line of thinking, it gets more and more like, well, where do you draw the line? Where do you draw the line? Right? And the problem with the concept of justice, it's kind of like the problem with religion. People get involved. And people are inherently, we're human, right? We're flawed. We have different flaws and they all work in concert in different ways. So I think the funny thing about justice is it can get very complicated. Yet every time I go down the trail of something that's super complicated, that which is complicated is usually made complicated because we as humans tend to take simple concepts, and in this case, the concept we're talking about is justice, right? And make it complicated in order to manipulate things into an outcome that goes our way because we're also selfish. And even when a simple interpretation does not go far enough, then we like try to make it really complex so we can make the argument for why an even stronger outcome is required, whether or not that's, the right or moral thing. It is a trap we fall into. So by over rotating on this concept, we can manipulate others into giving us what we don't want. But then I have to ask, is that really justice? Is that really justice? So one way to think about justice and how it's wielded is to break it down into two categories. And you can break it down into more: punitive versus restorative, right? Punitive versus restorative. Simply put, punitive justice sets up the framework for retribution against the transgressor. The key word there is retribution. And think like eye for an eye, right? I poked out your eye so you can poke out mine. That's punitive. At the end of a punitive approach, the person who caused the damage will be also hurt in a way that is somehow commiserate with the damage they caused. And they are harmed as the people were harmed. The death penalty for murders is an example of punitive justice. You killed somebody, we're killing you, right? That's punitive. So you must die. The families and friends of the person killed by the person who is being put to death by the death penalty, while they may get a morale boost, depending on if they feel like, yeah, that's the right thing, they don't really receive anything to restore the damage caused to their life by losing a loved one, right? When you lose a loved one, um, not only is all that emotional support gone and everything they did in your life from an emotional standpoint, but if they were working and the primary breadwinner, all that income is gone. So if you put somebody to death through the death penalty, it may make you feel a little better, but you still got to go figure out how to make the money that is no longer coming in on a regular basis in your life because your loved one, who was also the primary breadwinner, was killed. Well, is there a better option there? It's a question we should answer. And guys, on the live, so by the way, we are also live recording this on YouTube. On the live stream, if you have questions or comments, just do them in all caps so I see them. Because even with my glasses on, I don't always see real well. And hi, Eli. It's good to see you on. We just talked yesterday. Anyway, so that is punitive justice. Restorative justice, on the other hand, takes a little bit different approach. It seeks to restore the relationships and repair damage caused by a transgression. This is really easily accomplished in crimes where they are nonviolent. You didn't actually physically hurt somebody, but you may have vandalized the window in their store, and the obvious restorative action is to apologize and fix the window or pay for the window to be fixed, right? But it is also possible in the case of murder to come together and find a clear path towards reparations. It is possible. It takes both parties talking. And I think that's why restorative justice is not done much, especially in cases where violence happens, right? Because you need to have a mediator. You need to figure out something creative. It's hard to say if this then that for restorative approaches, because if this and that fits really easily on the broken window, not so easily in the more nuanced harms that things happen, right? And an example in a murder case of a restorative action that might happen would be that the person who killed somebody agrees to give 50% of their income to the family of the person they killed for the rest of their life. That's a big deal, right? But you did take a life. If that person is able to function in society without killing anybody ever again, which is a big if, but you want to assess that, then that restorative process is much better than putting that person to death for the people who were harmed by the action they took. It does assume that they're not going to kill again, and there's no real template for the right answer. That's why restorative justice is a little harder to think through as we get deeper into the topic. But it is, I think, a better approach to the extent and number of times we can take restorative action rather than punitive action. And I do realize there are other concepts in justice, by the way. I'm talking about two right now. Rehabilitative justice, I can't even say that word. Rehabilitative justice is a totally different track where you're rehabilitating the person, right? Especially in places where addiction was the root cause. That's That's important. Can you get the person to solve their addiction so they're not inclined to steal in order to pay for drugs? That's a better long-term outcome than throw them in jail and toss them in jail and throw away the key. But anyway, I'm back to just the restorative versus punitive for today's show. So I think part of why the action taken against Parler so impacted me just from an emotional standpoint, and it's disturbing, is the punitive nature of the action being taken is way out of scale for the perceived transgression. And I say perceived transgression because I actually think free speech is something that should happen and be supported, even if the words people are saying are abhorrent. That's how free speech works. Then we can go back and forth. And I know this sounds like a la 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 view of the world, but we can go back and forth and decide and challenge ourselves and come to stronger opinions one way or the other. That's free speech. That opens a marketplace of ideas so that the best ideas can prevail. When you hinder free speech, you hinder the development of ideas, and you start moving into dangerous territory where where you're seeking to control the minds of the people, and controlled people eventually break out, and that's even worse than if you would have just let them say the abhorrent thing, right? So the thing that disturbed me was the punitive nature of the action taken being way out of scale with the transgression. So you're literally destroying lives of people and taking their livelihood away because they did not intervene in somebody else's action before there was any proof that their hot air posturing was going to be acted upon, right? And I do see on YouTube like this thing about corporations. I'm not with you there. I'm going back to the moral action taken. Is it moral? It is not moral. Can they do it? They did it, right? We will see if any of the other crazy laws in our nation are going to uphold or not uphold Amazon turning off the servers with basically no warning. And that's a contractual matter. That doesn't matter to me on this. Is it moral? Is it moral? And then I mean we could get into the whole public, discourse being taken over by corporations. That's a whole different thing, right? But is it moral? I don't think it was moral. That's my problem with it. I don't think it was moral. And especially right now, as more and more controls are being enacted top down on the people through public partnerships, public-private partnerships between corporations and the government, which is totally happening with these specific corporations, right? They are on the public dole, right? Um, those public-private partnerships are fascism. That's what that is. The government is using corporations to corporatize our lives. Society works a little better that way than under communism when the managed society is happening. So my question isn't, can they do it? They did do it. My question is it moral? Because we need to start making decisions for ourselves based on our morality, not on if it's legal or not, right? Pot doesn't suddenly become moral as something to put in your body because it's legal. It also does not suddenly become immoral because they made it illegal. Same thing. I think it's quite dangerous to support people taking punitive action that are way out of scale with the transgression. And yet we've set up our society that it's okay to take 5 pounds of flesh in exchange for the slightest perception of a transgression. And you see this in just how people talk on social media. I say something that can be slightly spun out of, whatever, out of context into a verbal transgression, and I get death threats. I literally get death threats. I point out a fact that somebody doesn't like, and I get death threats. One of these days, one of those people might take action and actually try to hurt me, right? And those of you who don't know my background, I've gone through enough cycles of death threats from the left specifically, right? Because they go after the woman and the perceived weak one in a corporate environment or an organizational environment because the death threats are more likely going to work. I'm immune to them now. Like, I'm aware they happen, but whatever, you know, and think about this. So here's a specific example outside the entire concept of, whether or not Parler should have been shut down. Okay? That's not the question. Is it moral? I don't think it's moral. You guys know that by now. Um, should you expel a child from school for quote unquote eating a Pop Tart in the shape of a gun? The question isn't, was it intended to be in the shape of the gun? That can be debated. But a 5-year-old or a 6-year-old eats a Pop Tart in the shape of a gun and goes pew, pew, pew. Should they be expelled for the rest of the year? Or is that out of scale? Like, what do we know about children's and creativity? I think it's out of scale. That's a punitive action. Publishing names and addresses and calling for violence against the children of politicians we don't agree with, punitive and immoral. Getting people fired from their jobs because we don't agree with their opinions, punitive and immoral. And a lot of people think, well, you have to have consequences for what you say. Sure, let's talk about it. But when you're going for 5 pounds of flesh, whether you're right or left or anywhere in between, it's punitive. And when you're doing that, you are opening up a baser part of your nature that I think we should be putting in check. It's immoral. So none of the actions I just described address any core problems with an eye towards making amends or even persuading the person to change their heart. And that's the problem with punitive action and using punitive action to try to control thought and ideas, right? It extends a stick or a threat over their head and over the heads of others so that they don't step out of line. A stick will work to change behavior, but it will not work forever. Eventually, people get so tired of being controlled and hiding their opinions that they just say, fuck it. I'm going to go out and I'm going to do what I want. Or they organize under the surface and you don't even know they're organizing. And next thing you know, pendulum switch. That's what we're seeing now. People have become afraid to say what they really think. So they just don't unless they develop trust with people. And then, holy cow, like all of that stuff was happening under the surface and then it just exploded out. If it had been happening in an open marketplace of ideas, you could have been going back and forth and exchanging and critiquing and trying to win the hearts. When you win somebody's heart and you win their buy-in, you've got them. When you use a stick to address behavior, you don't really got them. It's like if I just beat my dog all the time, like she'll behave, right? But eventually she may snap. Eventually she may snap. Mine might not. I don't know. I've never hit her. So I think my point, though, is that we're tempted to demand punitive justice, especially when somebody we love is hurt. But I think the restorative approach is better. It's a better way. And when we see people demanding their pound of flesh, that's what's causing the division in our society and making it far worse. And what's funny is that we have all these media calls for the pound of flesh and making people pay. Every time I hear about making people pay, I'm like, you're just making it worse. Because when you make people pay out of scale for their crime, you set up the expectation that that will happen for every crime. And then when the tables turn and you're the one who transgressed because administrations and laws have changed, you're the one paying 5 pounds of flesh, only it becomes 10 and then 15 and then 20, right? So really what I'm saying is restorative approaches are much more important. And what this means for you in your day-to-day activities, right? And for me is when somebody says something that it's like or does something that I feel like needs to be made up for, rather than report them to the police to get and get all your friends out to mob mentality them into submission, figure out what the restorative approach is. I have found when somebody like makes me clench, waiting overnight before I decide really helps me with perspective. Because when you've hurt a friend of mine, I get really pissed and I want to like just punch you in the nose. It's a natural action, right? But it's not a restorative action, it's a punitive action. And to the extent that we can model how punitive action can be taken, then we show people a better way. And I think restorative justice as a theory has been sort of poo-pooed a lot in our society because it takes work. It takes work. It takes work from both sides. Sometimes one side's not willing to work. And then what do you do then? Well, you do the best you can, right? And because it's got a lot of gray areas. So you can't just say if this then that. We really like the certainty of if this then that. If you speed, then you pay a fine. Why? What did I really do wrong there? What's the restorative impact of me having gone 5 miles per hour over the speed limit? Now, if I speed and hit somebody and hurt them, there is definitely restorative action. But was it because I was speeding that I need to take that? Or is it because I hurt somebody because I was being reckless? All questions to think about. So I hope as we go into this weekend, you'll start looking around at the punitive things that people demand. And our politicians, by the way, it's frightening on both sides how much they're demanding, lists and we're going to go after people. And you hear that on the left, the right does it too. The right does it too. It's unacceptable in both ways to go after people for who they voted for. That's bullshit. The country is based on us voting for things, right? I don't actually vote, but you know what I mean? Like it's going after somebody for their opinion because people are making the decisions that they can based on what they know. And so rather than setting up a way for us to actually talk about that, we set up a framework where the goal is to win and then you take punitive action if somebody loses. Those are my thoughts on punitive versus restorative justice. If you like the show, and want to support the work I'm doing here, you can do it. Just go over to livingfreeintennessee.com and become a member. Click on membership. And of course, if you're thinking of coming to the spring workshop, get that done today. Also, you can buy your coffee at hollerroast.com. I do see a lot of comments in the YouTube. It's hard for me to live stream and respond to your comments for the podcast because people can't see what you're doing. So I appreciate all of those comments and I'll be reading them. I may do another follow-up show because I know I'm going to be getting some feedback on this one. With that, guys, go out. Make it a great week. As my dog whines in my living room. Well, guys, thanks for getting on the live stream. I'm seeing a lot of comments here. Yeah, that whole corporate versus government thing is something that I think that warrants a whole show. And I may have some. I may actually see if I can get Pete on my show to talk about that because I think that would be a fun one to have if he'll do it live. So anyway, thanks for coming on and giving me all of your comments, Eli. Vicious cycle of hatred. Yeah, we live in a vicious cycle of hatred, and the only way to get out of it is to do it anymore. That's my thoughts. I feel like even I get, like I'm not immune to this. I'm not like, hey, you guys need to do what I do. No, I get pulled into it too, like where stuff happens. I have somebody on my Facebook feed who I went to high school with who bullies me. And so I finally realized, and I've responded a few times, I finally decided I'm not responding to that person. And if he keeps bullying me, I'm just going to block all of his content because I'm stuck in this vicious cycle of hatred that he can't see anything but what the talking points of his politicians behind his point of view are. And I can't change that for him. Only he can change that for him. So I finally realized, man, I don't really like being bullied. I was bullied as a kid, and the best way to not be bullied is not associate with the people who bully me. That does the problem is that at some point we have to also stand up to the bully, right? And it's hard to figure out how to do that in a non-punitive way. Because if we stand up to the bully in a punitive way, we become the bully. And that's sort of what's been floating around in my head. So thanks for joining the live stream. I really appreciate you being here. I'm gonna stop the stream and we'll see what feedback comes back. Make it a great weekend. Woo! I'm gonna go to the mountains.